Hello there everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world right now. It's the Bielsko Biala World Cup this weekend in Poland. It's a really good track by the looks of things. Riders seem to be really loving it. Brand new track, never hosted the World Cup before, never hosted anything of that kind before. Dakota Norton and Valley Hole were fastest in semi-finals and will start last tomorrow, and we'll see how that all works out then, and we'll go through that in a couple of days time when we do the review of the race. But what I really want to talk to you about today is semi-finals and how they're not working and the fact that we don't get to see them anymore. So I have done 2 other videos that for various reasons didn't upload, or I couldn't upload. So yeah, I did talk about it a bit in there, but I thought, what the hey, I didn't actually get to upload. Let's do one now. It'll probably be a bit shorter, and we'll talk about how semi-finals have been going recently and the issues with them. There's no point in them anymore. They've completely lost the point of them. So the initial idea was that to have less riders in the final. So they have a final where they'd have 30 men and 10 women. They'd be able to show full runs, top to bottom, depending on obviously what track it was. Like Fort William Watson, that's a bit more difficult, but Wooden Waste, they can show top to bottom full runs. And then semi-finals was to show the riders that wouldn't have qualified for the final, which, you know, is a great idea, and it's one of the things that I think that when Discovery took over was actually one of the things they did that was really good in the main part, because when back in the Rebel days they only showed the top 30. They might have showed a few more if they had some extra time, so sometimes like they had a red flag and you got to see like maybe 10 more, but not very many, and they didn't show full runs, so like it was really a good idea. So yeah, fans could watch a final for free. So it's the same final runs. They got to see at least everyone go down. So if you didn't want to pay for the coverage that you've had to since last year, you could get to see a full run, or you get to see all the riders for free once come down the hill, which is really good, and that's out to the pay barrier. More coverage, which for fans like myself and others that are a bit more like super fanning, you get to see the rides way more, which is really cool. And this year it's going to be even better because they basically went down the route of let's have a finals day. So elite finals and junior finals are all on the same day, and the semi-finals are the same day as qualifying, which means you get 2 days of watching racing, which again is absolutely brilliant because we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, but it did it did sort of it did become sometimes a bit like monotonous, like it was a long section of stuff to watch, and like the commentators from the commentary box for like 6-7 hours a day, and that's, you know, difficult, especially when they've got to talk about riders twice on that day. But yeah, unless something changes, we're not going to be seeing any this year. And then that defeats the object in the first place. The point of them is so that riders can actually, like, we can see the other riders, that's fine. You know, the riders don't really seem to like them. But if they're not going to do it, it's pointless. And it just defeats the object of it, and it makes it worse for us as fans. Because we don't see the riders committing for the full run. They're sort of like, you know, well, we don't get to see an extra run anyway, but then, like, you know, we might not get to see riders doing as well because they only see 3 race runs. We have some stuff happening in Fort William where the weather affected a small portion of the semi-final run, which meant we missed out on seeing lots of riders. And I know that can happen anyway, but it kind of felt like it was the riders that did really well in qualifying, like Ocean O'Callaghan missed out and Charlie Hatton missed out, who both had really good qualifiers. And yeah, if they aren't broadcast, what's the point for anyone? So, I mean, what's Discovery's end goal with all of this? So, it's the belief of most that the idea was basically this was kind of like a sort of intermediary between going then to eventually to a point where they eliminate by whittling it down, so they're trying to get rid of privateers, get rid of all the sort of also rounds. It would basically just be a case of like our qualifying 30 men, 10 women, and that's it. And whether they just did that in one go and just went like that, cool, that's fine, and got rid of one, then maybe they start showing qualifying. but yeah, it just had, less riders at the events, which in reality works quite well. If you think about it, works quite well, but in reality doesn't. So I can't be the only one. When I went to watch World Championships at Fort William, you wouldn't have noticed if you didn't watch it at the event. There was like no one on track all the time, and it's really dull. It was a point, like sometimes an hour, where you didn't see a single person because it was in between runs because the weather was a bit funny. Less riders at the events works for the riders because it means that people aren't getting in the way for them for practice. And other things as well, like the track won't deteriorate quite so much, and the ruts will form in the right places. Anyone that's done any racing where you've got quite a breadth of ability will kind of understand what that means. And the plan is to kind of make it more like an F1. I think I'm going to make lots of references to F1 in this video, but make it more like an F1 style thing, where you'd see the same people every week. We'll talk more about that in a second. What are the options for what you could do with semi-final and qualifying or a race, or any of those options? So options are qualifying straight into 30 and 10 riders. Obviously that's what we have pretty much now as viewers. What we're seeing is that we're just seeing the 30 and 10, so 30 men, 10 women. Doesn't give the riders much chance to qualify though. So like the men, there was like 180, I want to say. I'm pretty sure the numbers on the number plates were at 180 when I was watching the live timing today. That down to 30. I mean, that's easy maths, isn't it? That's a sixth. Yeah, I've done my maths right. That's a sixth of the riders. That's like not very many in the men. I didn't see how many women there were, but there's still a good chunk. It cuts down, and downhill's brutal, and it should be brutal. That's why it's really good. But I don't know. I feel like it's there's chances you're going to miss people that you really want to see riding just from like maybe 1%. It's so close, like it's so ridiculously close now. I think like in qualifying, I think Greg Minnaar missed out on qualifying. He was quite a way down. He's only 10 seconds back on Vergier, and I think Vergier had like a couple of seconds to... Who was in second? Was Dak in second? I think Dakota Norton's been second. So it's not crazy. It's the way tracks are these days. They're so tight in terms of like times. They're just flat out. There's nothing that's going to make any time. Like the Bielsko Biala track is just straight, pretty much. Like it's got the odd technical bit, but they're so short. The technical sections, they're cool, but they're so short that they're not going to pull back any time in those. It's not going to make much time. So yeah, I don't like that as an option, but that's basically what we're doing now. Next option is what it should be, or what it is, but what it should be, which is qualifying, semi-finals, broadcast, and the final. So it gives fans way more chance to see the riders, and therefore the riders get more exposure. So we're seeing everyone twice rather than just the once. So for sponsors, it's great because they get to see. If you're sponsoring a top 60 rider, you're going to probably get to see them at least once, if not twice. So that's really good for us as a sport. I mean, there was always the problem, and it's always going to be the problem with downhill, is that unless someone goes crazy and does like a F1 style Drive to Survive thing, or we get to the riders a lot, which will be difficult with a big field of riders. But there's never going to be much chance of brand exposure. You get to see the riders for 2-3 minutes. That's it. That's all you really get to see them. They might do the odd interview with them, but not very much. And they might be wearing like their full kit in that interview. You don't get to see all the sponsors and the kit. You don't see the bikes. But it needs to have the same as broadcast thing. They do that because what's the point of it otherwise? Riders don't seem to like semi-finals. It's been mentioned by several people. They just don't like it. I think Loic Bruni said that if it carries on like it is, there's no way they can be able to do more events because it's just too stressful. I know it's their job, and so many of us would think like, I'd love that to be my job. But yeah, I mean, any job, if you think about it, if you equate it to a normal job, if your job was like super stressful, you'd be like, I don't want to do this anymore. here's my thought as well. It can be a bit boring for the fans if the track isn't right. I was never a massive fan of Lenzerheide. I think it's like probably the most boring track that's ever been raced on a World Cup. And there's some others definitely back in the past, like the likes of Willigan, but that had a bit of like intrigue to it. Like Lenzerheide's so one line, no one does anything interesting. It doesn't look fun. It's loads of straight lines, and they don't ever look like they're riding that quickly. There's that one rock garden that's interesting, but that's about it. And other than that, it's just like meh. And I remember sitting there, this time last year, roughly when the first race was, with this new format, being like, oh god, like, can we just get to the end, please? It's just like it's ridiculous. Like, I've watched, what would it be? 15, 25 plus 90, 115 riders now. And we were getting towards the end, and although it was exciting towards the end because of Rachel and Jordan Williams winning, it's still so boring. But it wasn't for the other, was it? I was just loving watching it. Like, Valdesol was sick. Monster Ham was really good, watching all of that. But yeah, I don't think it's right. I think, yeah. Next option is qualifying and then down to 60 or 50 men and 15 or 20 women, which is pretty much the old system from the Red Bull days. So that got, there was lots of controversy when Red Bull cut it. So it used to be 80 men and 20 women. I think it was 20 women at least. Definitely 80 men. And Red Bull cut it to 60 and 15, and lots of people weren't happy about that. But it didn't make much difference, I think, in the end. Yeah, maybe I think drop it down to 50 men. Then it gives them more chance to show stuff, and then bump it up to 20 women. The women have been riding so good recently, and it's not like back in the day when I think it might be on one of the ones that I didn't get to upload, but you'd get like 2 or 3 women who were quick, and that was it. So you'd sort of like sit there and you'd be like, yep, there's people going down the hill, and then like the last couple of women were going, but oh, it's amazing. And then a few years ago, it was like top 5 women were all really close, and now it's like the top 10 are getting even closer and closer, and they need at least 5 more riders. I think that's a really good option. And then try and show all the riders, and again, even that's just like the first quarter, get 30 seconds, just literally see them come down the bottom of the track, which does prove difficult, like we saw in Fort William, which I mentioned in the review of the Fort William World Cup. Like Douglas Vieira, because he went before Greg Renard, we saw him for like the very start of the track and the very end, and that's really unfair. But again, that's where you sort of like have the potential to try and move people around a little bit like they used to do again in the Red Bull days. And it happened in Andorra, like when the weather affected race was in Andorra, so we know it works, and it was fine. And it was like, oh, this is way better. That gives a hell of a race. And then it's the way to figure out how qualifying would work, because at the moment you can't broadcast qualifying, not in the men's with 180 people. And the way they do it as well, so if you don't know how they do qualifying, they do in the men's, they do 60 down to 1 in the terms of the championship order, just so it makes it a bit more fair, so that, because if they did it in championship order backwards and it rained, for example, the top riders that are last aren't going to necessarily qualify, or something like that. Whereas if you do it the other way round, they used to do it 1 through to at the end, it's more likely that the people that start going to get favourable conditions. Obviously it could dry up, but it's probably not going to dry up enough to give the people that's generally going to be slower enough to go above the people that are quickest. But then they swapped it round to make it a bit more interesting for the fans, so seeing 60 down to 1, and then everyone else afterwards. It's the same in the women's race. The juniors, they do it slightly differently, and I'm always confused about how they do it, but it doesn't really matter for me because that doesn't involve semi-final. If they can figure out a way to show that somehow, and that's a discussion for another video because there's way too much to talk about on that, then yeah, that would work really cool, because then you still get to see the 2 runs. It'd be great. Bit of a mad one, and it involves so much other stuff being built around it. No qualifying, everyone goes straight to the final. This involves having a feeder series, and that's again a discussion for a completely different video of how the feeder series would work. It would have to be a good feeder series. There's a few different options. Again, I think we'll do another video about a feeder series and what would have to happen for that to be good. But yeah, I think the way I'd see it working, I think the way it'd be cool is to have a feeder series. So going back to like other sports like MotoGP, Formula One, anything like that, they've all got sort of at least one thing that steps up into that. MXGP is the same, or Supercross is kind of similar. It's not really a feeder series. It's kind of like a shorter version. Like it's not necessarily younger people. It wouldn't have to be younger people than this. Like Formula One, they do it basically like it's a young person thing. As soon as you win the F2 championship, you can never compete in it again. You have to step up, and you wouldn't have to necessarily do it in that in mountain biking. But the way I see it working is having like 10 to 12, 10 to 12 teams with 3 or 4 riders per team, and the same number of men and women competing over the whole thing. So whether that's 30 or something each, so you get 60 riders altogether. Just pick a random number. I haven't thought about that at all. So then over the course of the season, you see the same riders every week. So the feeder series would almost be like the World Cup is now, where it's just like a chuck everyone in. If you want to race, you race. And maybe it could be split like European, North American, South American, whatever. Again, discussion for another video. But yeah, you'd see the same riders all the time. So you'd get to know the riders, you'd get to, you'd have favourites. You wouldn't have to think like, I absolutely love Sam Blenkinsop, and I hate the fact that we don't get to see him race barely ever anymore. I did think he'd make it in this weekend, but he didn't quite. But yeah, and it's people like that. It's like the Sam Blenkinsops, the Brooke McDonalds that you want to see that are like fan favourites because of the way they ride, but because they're getting on a bit, which it makes me feel really old. You don't get to see them, and whether they'd be in teams. Anyway, I think you might have someone like that in a team. I mean, that's the point of it, isn't it? And then qualifying would basically be like the Formula One, whereby everyone would be in it, but we just sort out a seeding order, and you do it with points because you have to have points for downhill, really, because there's so many factors at play with downhill, and the amount of people would go like, oh, for no points, I'll just qualify last if I know I'm definitely in. So that I get better race conditions. That's what used to happen with World Champs. So before they had like an actual qualifying thing at World Champs, people would just like trickle down to come out the gate first to get better track. If it rained, they know they'd have a chance of winning. And we can't have that happening in the World Cup down because it'd be rubbish. And it's been better at World since like everyone is in the right order. And I think so there have to be points for it, but just a few points. But yeah, that's the ones I can see working. But it definitely needs sorting out. This is ridiculous. It's just mad to make riders do an extra run that they don't need to do when we can't watch it. And yeah, I think just scrap it. I don't think they'll scrap it this year. I can't see that happening at all. But it needs to be got rid of for next year if they're not going to show it. I don't even know if anyone, because no one's, like the riders aren't talking about the fact that it's not being broadcast, so I don't know if they don't even know. Who knows? But we know as fans, and there's so many comments that I see. Pink white comments are the worst thing to look at in the world. It's like trying to read Facebook comments. But some of those are like, well, I paid for having the semi-finals because that's what I had last year and I haven't got it, so it's almost like I'm not getting the thing that I'm paying for. So yeah, sort it out, Discovery. Show it or don't. Whether it will change when it's on a Saturday, the race, and it's on the same time as the cross-country race, so it's then, I can't remember when the next round is. The next round Leo again? Is it Valvasol? Valvasol doesn't have XC this year, does it? One of them doesn't have XC, but normally there's Valvasol or Leo again. So when it's on a Saturday again, assuming that it is going to be on a Saturday, the race, we never know anything. Be interested to see if they show it then. Who knows? But I can't think that it's because of other events happening. So someone suggested it's because there's other things happening and Eurosport aren't showing it because it's on the internet. You can just, I'm pretty sure you can just literally go like, oh, it's on there. It's just go and watch it online. Like, everyone else does that sort of thing. So I'm sure Eurosport Discovery could sort that out. And yeah, like the Giro's on at the moment, but there's always going to be something on, and it's always going to take a back seat because we're a weird bunch, us mountain bikers. We're not mainstream, so we're always going to take a back seat unless something big happens. And we don't really want to be mainstream. That's the way it should stay. But yeah, just thought I'd do a quick rundown of that rather than talking about the race because nothing massively interesting. I don't think happened in qualifying, and the same like we can't see it anyway. And like last time, my plan was basically the video at this point would be like, this is what happened in the semi-finals. You don't have to watch it. You don't want to just go straight and watch the final. But I couldn't see it, so I don't know what happened. So by watching all the team videos and all the rider videos, I could work out what happened at Fort William. So I'll work out later on what's happening when we do the review video in a couple of days. We'll go through all that, so we'll know how it's all worked out. But I'm super excited for the race tomorrow. It was really good at Fort William last time. It built so well. It was definitely better the way it was, going through like all the junior women, junior men, elite women, elite men. It worked really well. So yeah, other than the fact that it feels really weird because it feels like they do like the juniors really unprofessional. It's like, oh, it's free, so they just kind of like go like, oh yeah, it's racing. And then when they go into the main broadcast, it's like they forget about the fact that's just happened almost. So like when they started the elites, it was like, oh, okay, the first race, yeah, off they go to the first ride. And I was like, Rick, you just literally said that like 2 hours ago in the junior men's. And I know like they, people aren't watching stuff, but it just felt a bit weird. So yeah, like, see you in a couple of days, and we'll talk about how it's all worked out. Really hoping that we get the top 5 of the men's is interesting. It's really different this time. We got Lucas Shaw up there, Dakota Norton up there. Who else up there? Someone a bit more random. Lackey, Stephen McNabb's up there. That's not random because he's been riding really well, and this sort of track he'll probably do well on. So really excited to see how this is going to go. And we're going to have like Bruni coming down really early, assuming that they do what they did recently, where they just stick over because he's protected, so come down. I assume Troy's protected as well because he didn't qualify well. I thought when I was watching the coverage, the live time, it must have started raining because Ocean and a couple others came down with slow times, but then it obviously didn't, because then after that, like, Dakota Norton went ridiculously quick and beat Lucas, and Lucas Shaw went quick. No, because Lucas before them. But yeah, and Vergier went quick as well. So it obviously didn't rain, or at least if it did, it rained really briefly and dried up pretty quickly, and they just went slower because they were being careful. But yeah, excited for that. Let's hope it's good tomorrow. Again, new track, always makes this crazy. Hoping for rain, because if it's a wet track, this is going to be amazing to watch. Hope maybe not a super mudder, but like a mudder is always good. So let's enjoy that tomorrow. See you then. Enjoy the race. Have a good one. Tarry bye.